and welcome everyone to today's Synergist Product Demo webinar, VelocityEHS Industrial Hygiene Product Spotlight, the smart way to manage your IH program. I'm Kay Bechtold, Managing Editor of the Synergist, the magazine of AIHA. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and especially VelocityEHS for sponsoring this webinar. Today's product demo is scheduled for 30 minutes, and we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to dive right in and quickly introduce today's speaker. Dave Reese is the Principal Solution Strategist of Industrial Hygiene for VelocityEHS. He is a board-certified industrial hygienist and safety professional with over 30 years of EHS experience. In 2019, VelocityEHS brought Dave in to oversee its industrial hygiene solutions. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Dave.
Excellent. Thank you, Kay. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you, AIHA, for allowing us to have 30 minutes to give a brief overview of our solution. Navigate, go through here. VelocityEHS is a very large software company. We have a lot of different software modules that span all EH and S. What we're going to be focused on today is within our industrial hygiene management module or solution. We're going to cover basically samples and equipment management and program management. So in looking at software, we always try to solve problems and challenges. And when we look at the industrial hygiene profession and some of the challenges that we have, especially over the last decade, there's been a lot of industrial hygienists retiring, moving on to different jobs, going to consultant companies. So the sheer number of on-site IH professionals at most of our companies and most of our prospect companies, they are decreasing pretty significantly. And that's resulted in a lot more IH programs being led by EHS generalists, safety professionals, environmental people. And as those IH professionals have moved on or retired or went to different jobs, there's a lot of loss of knowledge. So all of that, 10, 20, 30 years of experience working in that industry, a lot of it's lost because everything's been used in paper, or maybe they have Excel. So you got a plethora of Excel files, you got paper folders, or worst case, they're stuffed in boxes and shipped off to a salt mine, and then you've got to, pull them back and do the retrieval from the salt mines and go through paperwork, and it's just not a sustainable system going forward. The issue with moving into software, historically, industrial hygiene software has just been way too complicated. It's been hard to get up and running. The end users they can have a challenge with the user interface, and one of the biggest issues is it just takes, a half a person at some companies, a full-time person, just to administer the software. So we went ahead and did a multi-year study. We did a lot of voice of customer discussions. We did a ton of research, and we were just trying to figure out, how do we solve all these challenges? And the first thing that was on our goals was to simplify not only the implementation and use of the software, but also the administration of the software. Because industrial hygiene software historically has not been something that's been sustainable. Most people are jumping around from application to application and not getting what they really need out of software. In doing so, what we found is that we can really go from a compliance-based, where you're just checking boxes, to more of a risk-based solution. And when you go to more of a risk-based solution, you can really simplify and streamline the process. And because it's risk-based, you can have a lot more better documentation, so you can have a lot better knowledge transfer. So those of you that are around my age and thinking about retirement, when you hand the keys over to the next person taking over that program, a system like ours can really help package it up in a nice package, wrap it in a bow, and hand it off to the next person. And the ultimate goal that we really try to get with this thing is we really wanted to help management and workers understand industrial hygiene, and most importantly, because we've always, a lot of us have been really poor at this, we really need to show the value of what industrial hygiene, what we do, and what the value is to the organization. Okay, I want to limit the PowerPoints and jump right into the application. So let me go ahead and share my screen. You should be able to see my application here. I've logged in as a system administrator, and this is where you would change all your pick list items and you would configure the application and whatnot. The one thing that really stood out when we did our own 2-year study and a root cause analysis of all of the issues and support and customer feedback, we did a root cause analysis, and it really stemmed down to a couple really simple things. And I say simple in quotes because they weren't simple to solve, but it really brought to head what the real issues are with IH databases. The main item that we found is that every time you implement industrial hygiene software, you got to create your own chemical and OEL database. It's a pain in the butt to set up, maintain it, support it. It's just a lot of additional work. So at VelocityEHS, what we've done is we've gone out and we went into a global list of OELs and added up all those stressors, took a union of all of those, met with, I think we were at 10 at that time, 10 laboratories. We're a lot more than that now, but back then we took, I think it was about 10 laboratories and did a union of all the things that they analyzed for. So we put together basically a whole big laundry list of, back then it was about 1,800, we're over 2,000 now, master stressors. So we basically created a chemical and OEL database. So to get your chemical and OEL database set up in your company, it no longer takes weeks or a month or more time to set up when your lab interface and all that stuff. Literally, you just scroll through, you click on the stressors of concern, it throws it into your database. And along with that comes a lot of chemical and physical chemical properties and a global list of OELs. So upfront, when we implement it, all this data just gets loaded over. So it's ACGIH, it's Canada, mines, bunch of European countries, state OSHAs, basically a global list of all of the OELs around the world are automatically loaded for you. And we update these every quarter. So setting this up shaves significant of time. Some of the benefits of that is now that we have the master stressors, we don't need to set up an interface with all these different laboratories. Let's go ahead and integrate directly with the laboratories. And I'm going to navigate to our survey screen and show you a benefit of having an integrated lab solution. So if I'm going to a study, in my example, this is a refinery, I'm doing a BTEC study. If I want to attach records for here, I want to attach everything. So I want the finished IH report. I want the scanned in lab results. I want the field notes. I want any diagrams, pictures, videos, anything that's tied to that survey, upload it here. If I need to access it, I just click on the window, it pulls up whatever scanned in, and I can view the data. Setting up my survey, I'm going to pick my laboratory. So my fictitious lab here is Acme. And once I select that lab, now I'm going to get access to the lab's catalog directly. So if I got a lab profile like BTEX, it shows me those, 4 stressors that will be analyzed for. But let's say I wanted a 9-metal scan. Now it has all 9 metals. So I can quickly, with a single click of the button, figure out exactly, because I'm ordering right off the lab's catalog. And I pick BTEX. And once I select that, then it automatically gives me the lab's sampling and analytical guide information directly. So I don't have to go to the lab website and query up all this information if I need it. We just present it to you directly. And the beauty of this is the catalog and the SAG information is all provided from the laboratories. So you know it's accurate. Okay. Once I set up the surveys, at the end of the day, if I need to go and create a lab submission, I can generate that right off the bat. It has the laboratory information, my information. It's got all of the sample information, the analytes, cast number, analytical method, if those are specified, will show up here automatically. And the beauty is I go ahead and submit that directly. And then when the lab data comes back in from the laboratory, I've got my QA screen. Years ago, a lot of software vendors just push the data directly into you. We wanted to have a way for you guys to QA the data, because let's say the laboratory makes a mistake on the unit of measure, or the numbers are outliers, they don't make sense. You don't want this data to be loaded in directly. You want to have a screen to kind of review it first. You look at it, it looks good, then you hit the accept button. Then and only then does all of the results get fed into you. Okay. I glanced over it real quick, but I'll jump into the sample screen. So once I've set up my surveys, we're going to go ahead and create some samples. And the way our system's laid out, it's very simplistic. We really spent 22 designs with a third-party consulting company to really optimize the screen, because what we wanted to have was less navigation around to try to figure out where you're going. If I want to go to the sample screen and look at sample data, we have a sample tab right up here, and I can do multiple things. I can query, so give me all the samples, personal samples, in these departments, these jobs, these tasks, collected by who, between a date range for a certain stressor. I can mix and match any of these criterias and search and get all of my records that meet that criteria. And then when I'm in that record, if I want to go to the detail, I just click on the item and it pulls it up here. We designed this screen to adjust as you're putting in data. So we didn't want to have multiple screens. We didn't want to have one screen with multiple tabs down here for the results, where you would have to figure out, oh, it's a noise. I put the noise results here. I put the fiber results here, the chemical results here. We wanted the system to be built in a way that modifies for you. Good example of this, if I add in a new record and I want the sample type to be a wipe sample, well, then show me the wipe area and the unit of measure for wipe areas. If it's not a wipe sample, it's just personal, well, hide that field. So we really optimize the screen to adjust so your training's easier, your time to enter in a sample's easier. We reduced the size of the screen and our data entry time by about 70% versus our old version. So pretty significant changes. Some of the highlights, if you have multiple start and stops, obviously you can put as many of those. The sample duration is calculated for you. I used a certain type of Gillian pump. I used to calibrate it, the pre and post calibrations. System calculates your average and volume, pretty basic. This is where I tie in my results to my segs. If I don't have a seg, I can just go ahead and select the department, job, task. And if you notice here, this is a 10-hour shift, but I only monitored 8 of the 10 hours. So when I calculate my time-weighted averages, treat the unsampled time as the same or 0. I set it to 0. And if you remember, that survey was set up for B-text. So the B-text is automatically populated for you. And because we're pulling off a master list of stressors, we know what result screen goes with each analyte. So for benzene and all of these vapors, you're going to get this result screen. If it was noise, it would be a different result screen. So the only thing you need to fill out on our screens is the exposure limit. Once you select that, the laboratory is going to push the concentration of mass to you. We're going to take the exposure limit that you select, and if it's an extended shift, we'll do the extended shift OEL, shift adjusted OEL calculation for you based on your settings. If it's brief Scala, OSHA, whatever method you guys have, we can set that. So that's done automatically for you. And if you notice, the concentration was 0.55, but we had 2 hours of 0 exposure, so that reduces the time weighted average to 0.44, which happens to be 110% of the shift adjusted OEL. So a lot of calculations going on here. The only thing that the users have to select is the OEL, and the system will calculate everything else. Because that's over 100% of the OEL, we highlight that in red. And obviously you can, store, if you have 9 metal scan, you'd see all 9 metals in here. Here we got 4 stressors. So we got the results for all 4 of these shown. Okay. The other thing that we like to do is reducing navigation is embed the reports directly here. So rather than putting in your samples, then going to a report section and saying, oh, I need to run employee notification letter, and I need to pull up this sample or all samples between this date range. I'm already on the record. So let me run the notification letter right here. So I can put it in my comments here. We have a set of standard phrases that will allow you to customize your employee notification letter. And I could just check on the ones that I like, that I want to show in the report. And I can run the report quickly, and it just shows it all right here. Very simple, standard letter, nice table of results. Here's the 2 phrases I wanted to show, and if I had any free text, it would show up here. Very simple letter, very easy to do right here on your screen. You don't have to navigate away from it. So that gives you a good kind of understanding of the base, fundamental things that a hygienist would do as far as, setting up your surveys, collecting samples, doing your lab submissions. We can capture all of your equipment in here, your equipment inventory. And for each of the pieces of equipment, we've got a date range, which is the next calibration dates. And you can quickly say, you know what, of my 150 pieces of equipment in my company, show me all the things that are overdue for calibration. It gives me my punch list. Now I can pull these off the shelf, ship them out for calibrations. And I can also store the factory calibration certificates themselves. So here's all of the 2019, 2021 factory calibration certificates, critical for any future litigation. But I can also link right to the user guide. So if I have people that don't use equipment all the time and they need to access the user manual, you can upload or link to it directly. So you can link to it or you can upload, whichever is easier. And with all this fundamental stuff in here, I'm going to take a step back and start talking about how we help you manage all the data, all your locations. Was meeting with the company just earlier today. They have 600 locations around the world. 1 headquarters hygienist. He works with consultants. He has EHS generalists at some of their locations, but he's just trying to wrap his arms around it all. How do I manage all that? And that's the reason for these 3 items here, which helps you manage your IH program itself. The first thing that we do is we define your SEGs, your symbol exposure groups. And how we design it in our system is it's any combination of department or area or location, job, task, and equipment. So any combination of those, you can create your SEGs. And the purpose of the SEG screen is to really go through, and I'm going to filter out, at a high level, do my site characterization, and I'm going to set flags of saying, you know what, these SEGs need to be in 1 or more medical surveillance programs. We should probably use some qualitative exposure assessments on them, and we should probably flag them for some sampling. So this is, I'm casting a wide net. I'm getting my arms around my site characterization. And then I'm going to have some of these where there's a no on all of these, like the tank yard operators, routine duties or full shifts. There's really no there. We're going to do our negative exposure documentation at this level. So for this thing, I can list all of the stressors and say there's nothing really there. I can list the people in the SEGs. Another example here. Here's a list of stressors, and I can filter for each one of these here. So the purpose of this first screen really is, at the end of the day, if I was to hand the keys over, somebody could step in here and say, okay, what's my site look like? Where are the risks? This basically goes through and displays them and it kind of sets the flags for the next couple options in here. So when let's say I've got, for a refinery, I've got 50 segs laid out or 40 segs. There might be only 25 of those of significance. So when I go to my qualitative assessment, we'll declutter my list. Let me just go ahead and do my qualitative exposure assessments on the segs of interest. And that's what we try to do in our system. Our out of the box, we follow AIHA, exposure assessment strategy, of course. And we do that for a purpose. You know, having done this for the last couple decades, if you're new to qualitative exposure assessments, you haven't rolled out a program, or you're training, you know, consultants, non-IH professionals, we highly recommend using that. And then once you get your baseline assessments done, then you can look at different variables: frequency, duration, control technology factors, whatever the case may be. You can start to get granular then. But just to do your baseline assessment, a lot of our customers agree that this is the simplest way to go. So if I was to go into the actual assessment here, I've got my seg, I've got my controls identified. I'm looking at, for this seg, exposures to benzene. Let's do the assessment. So I've got a history of assessments in here. Before I do the assessment, I might want to look at the data. So rather than navigate to running an IHStat report or pushing the Bayesian tool, or leaving this screen, going to another report to run data and stats, and then come back to the screen, let me just toggle real quick and do a quick calculator. So I'm going to say, you know, for this seg, for benzene, give me all of the personal samples, you know, looking at this OEL between a certain date range, and I can get a quick calculation, you know, looking at the range, arithmetic, geometric mean, standard deviation, LCLs, UCLs, 95th percentile, 95, 95 point estimate, whatever, you know, just a quick calculator to give me an idea to help me go in and do my actual assessment here. So where do you think it falls as far as your OEL? Companies use different metrics. That's why we want to include multiples of those on the other tab. And once I do my assessment, give me a risk rating of 6. Critical point is this uncertainty factor. So this uncertainty rating. If it's certain, uncertain, or highly uncertain, I'm really sure, I'm not 100% certain, or I'm just guessing. If I'm highly uncertain, it gives a rating of a 2. The 6 times 2 is 12. It just helps you set your priority rating on where you should put your resources. So let me go back to my screen. If I did a sort on my info gathering, I've got all of these things in here above 0. These are really where I should probably put my attention to, my limited resources. Mainly these couple up here are really important. So that's going to help me go out and drive my sampling plan. And my sampling plan, I could build that out. The beauty of this is if you're working with consultants or each person at a location, you can work with them, lay out, you know, here's the sampling plan for the year, the quarter, the month. So here's the segs. We're going to take personal area wipe samples for these stressors. You list out the number that are planned. Then the system does a quick query and say you've taken 4 of these, 1 of those, so you're at 5 of 40%. So you're at 12.5% of plan. Fantastic. Sounds like I'm a little bit behind on my schedule this year. So it's just a great way to lay out and lay out your resources and track your resources. We've got a bunch of reports in here, graphic reports. So if I wanted to have a report that shows all of my sampling plan percentages broken down per location, you can graph that out. And we actually band it green, yellow, red, so it's simple to understand. The last thing I want to show you on the seg matrix is we also wanted to make this a presentation tool. So now you can use this software to actually sit down with management and say, okay, we've invested all this time, we did our full baseline assessment, but now we want to look at the overall risk for that site for industrial hygiene or health exposures. So we designed this to be specifically, so it's something that management looks at and says, oh, that's really similar to a safety risk matrix. But instead of severity and likelihood, we're looking at health effect rating and exposure rating. This could be laid out in a 5x5, 8x8, 4x2, whatever your company has. This could be laid out that way. And of course, management's going to draw their eyes to the red and go, whoa, what are these 4 reds? And now you can show them the 4 reds. You can click in there and go into the details and have a good discussion. But to start the discussion and get management and workers engaged, we built this in a way so we can relate it directly to the other risk matrix in safety or quality or ergo or other EHS or main business processes. With that, there's a lot more to cover, but I wanted to make sure that we left time for questions. So I'm going to go back and stop sharing and go back to our PowerPoint. And I'm going to open it up to Kay to see if there's any questions that you have.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dave. It looks like we have about 3 or 4 minutes left for questions. Just a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please type it into the chat window on the right side of your screen and send to everyone. The first question we have, Dave, is someone says, we work with a local lab and they haven't been able to send us the data electronically. Do you work with smaller local labs?
Great question. Yes, we do. One of the reasons why we built the system the way that we did was there was a lot of local laboratories that don't have IT resources. And historically, when we went to them and said, hey, we'd like to work with you and set up a lab interface and talk about APIs and XML files, they got glossy-eyed and said, we just don't have the resources. So we actually built a portal for all of our laboratories. They could go in directly and work within our system. They don't see all of our customers' information. It's a lab portal where they can see their lab submissions, put the results in via like 3-4 different ways, and send the results directly to the customers. So yeah, we definitely work with smaller labs also.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dave. The next question I have is, we have not rolled out a qualitative assessment program yet. Is that required to work with your system?
It's not required. Highly recommended, and there's a lot of gains in efficiency. The last probably 10 minutes I was showing the left-hand side of our system. It automates things. It helps get you organized, helps get your arms around it. But if you're not ready for that and you just need sample tracking right now, absolutely. So the system's built to be a lot more ad hoc than our previous system and other systems, just because that's the reality of what we're faced with. If you get a phone call for employee concern and you got to run out and collect a sample, you shouldn't be forced to create a seg to enter in that sample.
Okay, great. Thanks. I think we have time for just one last question. And the next person asks, our company develops pharmaceuticals. Can we add our active pharmaceutical ingredients and company-specific OELs?
Yes, so we do come with over 2,000 stressors, but we do have the ability, especially for the pharmaceutical world, they could put in their own APIs, or anybody that has a company level AI, company level OELs or OELs for those APIs, a lot of acronyms. Yeah, you can set those up in the system and manage those through history.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dave. I think I just have hopefully one more question if we can get to this one quick since we're at the top of the half hour. Have someone who asks, how do you propose handling data privacy requirements in Europe?
Whew, that's a loaded question. So that's kind of scaled in various levels. So there's user data level access. And so you got to look at, site level access and slicing the data that way. There's server requirements. You got to make sure that it's SOC 2 and a bunch of other data securities. That's kind of a loaded question. There's multiple levels to that. So I don't think I got time to go into all those, but yeah, that's a critical question. You should definitely be asking your software vendor. And if they want to get a hold of me to have more detail, yeah, I've got my email on the slide there if TD wants to
Okay,
reach out to me.
great. Yeah, thank you so much. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Just wanted to let everyone know that we'll be sharing all questions from today's event with VelocityEHS. So if we didn't get to your question, please know that we'll pass it along. My thanks to Dave Reese for his presentation, to VelocityEHS for sponsoring today's product demo webinar, and to all of our participants. Registration is already open for another upcoming Synergis webinar on October 6th. Please join us for 7 Steps to Improve Your Industrial Hygiene Program, a Synergis webinar sponsored by VelocityEHS. Thanks to everyone again, and hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate your time. I know it's valuable.
All right, this has been great. Thank you, everyone. This actually concludes today's webcast. Thank you all for attending. The recording will be available at aiha.webvent.tv. We will send all registrants an email tomorrow with that link. And please visit our event calendar to sign up for future webcasts.